Welcome to the deep dive. We're diving into Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. It's a book that really digs into those different perspectives on wealth and work and how we think about money, financial education and all that. And our mission today is, pretty simple, really. It's to pull out those core idea and contrasting viewpoints that it offers, like a shortcut to understanding the key stuff without having to read the whole thing.
Yeah, exactly. It's a book that a lot of people have probably come across at some point. And what makes it kind of unique is that it intentionally presents like two very distinct financial philosophies shaped by the author's own experiences with his two dads, so to speak.
Right. So let's jump into those two dads, right? First, we've got the poor dad, who was, a highly educated guy, PhD, multiple degrees, went to top tier schools. But his approach to money was all about, security, playing it safe. He believed that his house was his biggest asset and that, institutions like his employer and the government would kind of provide that safety net. And it's interesting, he was actually the one who tended to pay his bills last. When you were reading this, did any of that, resonate with you? Did it seem like a more traditional view of, financial stability?
Absolutely. It's a mindset that I think a lot of us are kind of raised with, You prioritize education, get a good job, rely on that steady income.
Exactly. Then you've got the rich dad, totally different background, less formal education, more of a, true entrepreneur. And his philosophy was all about understanding and managing risk, viewing his house, not as an asset, but almost like a drain on his resources, and relentlessly focusing on, making his money work for him. And one key difference, he always made sure to pay his bills first.
Yeah, that's huge.
What I found really interesting was that having these two totally opposing influences forced Kiyosaki to actually think critically about money, right? It wasn't just about picking a side, it was about figuring out his own path based on those stark differences. Did that stand out to you as well?
Totally. Often the most valuable learning comes not from being told, this is the right answer.
Yeah.
But from having to wrestle with different viewpoints, figuring things out for yourself.
Exactly. So the book makes this pretty bold claim about where we really learn about money. It argues that it actually happens at home, not in school. What are your thoughts on that? Based on your own experiences, what do you think?
Well, it brings up this really important point about the subtle, unspoken financial lessons that we absorb from our parents, right? Their attitude toward debt, saving, work ethic. These things can have a huge impact on our own financial behaviors later in life, often without us even realizing it. What about you? What kind of financial conversations or habits do you remember from when you were growing up?
That's interesting because that leads us to what the book calls the first core lesson. The rich don't work for money. Kiyosaki really illustrates this with his first job, which was working for his rich dad in a convenience store, right? But get this, 10 cents an hour. What was your reaction when you read about that? Because to me it sounded, kind of exploitative.
Oh yeah, totally. On the surface it sounds awful. The boredom, feeling undervalued. But the rich dad did that on purpose. He wanted him to feel that, to show him the difference in mindset. The poor and middle class, they trade their time for a limited amount of money. The wealthy figure out how to make money without being directly tied to their work.
It's like the idea that you don't get rich by trading time for money.
Exactly.
And the book argues that just making more money, a bigger salary, doesn't actually fix your financial problems if you don't have a good understanding of money, right? It even points out that the poor dad, despite his education and earning potential, he still struggled financially. Do you think that's a common thing?
Definitely. You see people making good money, but they're living paycheck to paycheck. And that's where the rat race comes in. You're stuck in this cycle of fear of not having enough, so you always want more. And as your income goes up, your spending often does too, so you never really get ahead. The rich dad's approach is to break free from that cycle. Build income streams that aren't directly tied to your time.
Right. So after that, 10 cents an hour job, Kiyosaki then worked for his rich dad, get this, for free. That sounds crazy, right?
What was the point of that? It's about shifting the focus from the immediate paycheck, to the long-term value of knowledge and experience. No money involved, so the focus is all about learning the mechanics of business and finance. And that's way more valuable in the long run. This actually ties into the book's emphasis on financial literacy, which it argues schools don't really teach.
Yeah. I mean, we spend years learning skills for a job, but we don't always learn how to manage the money we earn. What do you think about that?
It's a big gap, right? School gives you the skills to make a living, but it doesn't always teach you about building wealth, understanding how money actually works, how to protect it, how to make it grow. And that's where the book introduces this really important difference between assets and liabilities.
Yeah. So assets and liabilities, these are like core concepts in the book, and they're defined very clearly. An asset puts money into your pocket while a liability takes money out. It sounds simple enough, but it has big implications when you apply it to your own life, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It really challenges some of the things we think we know. The book actually argues that for a lot of people, a house is more of a liability than an asset because the mortgage payments, property taxes, all the maintenance costs, it's constantly taking money out of your pocket. Did that surprise you at all?
I mean, it definitely made me think twice about the whole owning a home thing. And the book argues that wealthy people, they focus on getting assets, things that generate income like rental properties or investments, while the poor often, well, only have their labor to rely on, right? And the middle class, in trying to achieve this, American dream, they end up with liabilities like mortgages and expensive cars, thinking they're assets when they might not be.
It's a trap a lot of people fall into. And that leads to the next lesson. Mind your own business. Now, this isn't saying you should be like isolated or anything, but it's about putting your energy into building up your assets. The book tells this great story about Ray Kroc, the guy behind McDonald's. People thought he was in the hamburger business, but he said, no, my business is real estate. It was the land under those franchises.
I love that story.
It's about looking deeper and seeing what truly drives wealth.
Right, because the book points out that most people spend their lives building someone else's business. Their employer's profits, the government's tax revenue. The rich dad, he's all about building up your own portfolio of income-generating assets.
And think about it. Wanting a raise or a promotion, totally understandable. But it keeps you focused on that income statement, the money coming in from your job. The book suggests, keep your day job for now, but start building up those assets that will give you passive income. Then you can move towards, real financial independence. And there's another interesting point about how different financial groups approach, like luxury items.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. The book says that rich people, they usually get those fancy things after their assets are making enough money to comfortably pay for them. But poor and middle class, they often buy those expensive things first, even going into debt to do it. Did that make you rethink any of your own spending habits?
It definitely puts things into perspective, and this leads us to a more complex topic: the power of corporations and taxes. The book shares the rich dad's view on how wealthy people often use corporations to, manage their taxes better.
Right, corporations. So the history of income tax is pretty revealing. It was often meant to target the very wealthy. But the book suggests that as government spending grew, the tax burden spread, affecting more and more people.
Exactly. And the rich dad's perspective is that financially savvy people, they understood how to use legal structures like corporations to their advantage. Now, a corporation, it's not always some huge building or anything. It can be a legal framework, right? And it can offer some real benefits. What were your first thoughts on this when you were reading?
Well, it definitely challenges the usual employee mindset. The book points out that corporations can often pay their expenses before taxes, which individuals can't usually do. We get taxed on our income first, then pay expenses. And corporations can offer legal protection too.
Interesting. Another fascinating concept. The book says that the rich, they invent money. And this isn't about, anything illegal, but about financial creativity and resourcefulness. There's this story about Alexander Graham Bell trying to sell his telephone to Western Union. They turned him down. They couldn't see the potential.
Missed opportunities because they lacked vision.
Exactly. It's about spotting opportunities that others don't see.
So financial intelligence, it's about having more options, being able to think outside the box, being decisive. The book gives an example of buying foreclosed properties, understanding the market, getting short-term loans, quickly finding a buyer. It's being proactive.
It shows that creating wealth is not passive. You need some financial smarts, see those undervalued assets, and take calculated risks. The key here is, money is just an idea, and a trained mind can figure out how to create wealth where others see limits.
I like that. Money is just an idea. Okay, so lastly, we have work to learn, not for money, which takes us back to Kiyosaki working for his rich dad, for little or no pay. The real payment was the education he got. Looking back at your own career, how does that idea of prioritizing learning sit with you?
It's about the long game, right? The book stresses learning about different aspects of business: accounting, law, banking, investing. Even if you're not going to be an expert in all of them. Kiyosaki actually quit a high-paying job at Standard Oil. He valued learning more than the security of a corporate job. And the book also emphasizes how important sales and marketing skills are, no matter what you do.
Yeah, those are useful no matter what. So the book doesn't shy away from the obstacles that can get in the way, even for people who are financially literate. Things like fear of losing money, cynicism, laziness, bad habits, even arrogance. Which do you think are the biggest roadblocks for people?
I think fear and cynicism can be really powerful. The fear of making mistakes, losing money, it stops people from taking action. And cynicism, that negativity, it blinds you to opportunities. The book has this counter to failure. Winners learn from setbacks. Losers let them define them. There's that great quote from Rockefeller: "I always try to turn every disaster into an opportunity."
Yeah, that's a good one. And it warns against doubt, saying cynics never win. It also encourages changing how we think about our limitations. Instead of, "I can't afford it," which shuts down possibilities, it suggests asking, "How can I afford it?" It
Yeah.
makes you think more creatively.
Absolutely. And finally, it warns against arrogance, thinking you know it all. That can stop you from learning new things. So for you, the listener, who's joined us for this deep dive, how do you actually put these ideas into practice? The book offers some steps.
Yeah, there are a lot of actionable things in there. The first thing is developing that financial awareness, seeing that there is gold everywhere, as the book says, but you have to be trained to see it. You need to figure out your financial goals, what you want and what you don't want. That's your motivation. And the book is a big advocate for investing in your financial education. Seminars, books, learning from your own experiences, both the good and the bad.
And it says to be careful about whose financial advice you take. Don't listen to people who are struggling themselves or who are driven by fear. The book actually suggests building relationships with people who are financially successful, not for handouts, but for information and perspective. He calls it legal insider trading, which is funny.
I like that. So the book suggests mastering one income-generating strategy before you branch out. It also emphasizes this idea of pay yourself first. It's from another book, The Richest Man in Babylon, and it's about putting money into your asset column before you pay your bills. How do you think people can actually do that, especially if they're on a tight budget?
Well, even a small percentage of your income automatically transferred into a savings or investment account. The key is consistency. Make it non-negotiable. The book also recommends finding good financial professionals like brokers or advisors, but make sure they're actively investing themselves. And it has this interesting idea about finding deals. Always try to get something for free in every transaction. The Indian giver approach to investing.
Finding deals. So the book gives practical examples too, looking into foreclosures, tax liens, making offers, even if they're low, but having those escape clauses to protect yourself. It even suggests something as simple as regularly checking out different neighborhoods to spot potential real estate deals.
Oh, that's smart. And it tells this story about a friend who used money that was meant for college to invest in real estate instead. And now he's generating passive income. It's a great example of financial intelligence in action. Ultimately, the book reminds us that money is an idea, and changing your mindset is the most important step. It differentiates between earned income, passive income from things like real estate, and portfolio income from things like stocks and bonds. And the wealthy focus on turning earned income into those other two.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Rich Dad, Poor Dad, the big takeaway is change how you think about money. Don't just work for money, make your money work for you.
And it shows that financial freedom is a choice. It's not about luck, it's about the financial choices you make every day. Do you build wealth or stay stuck in that paycheck cycle?
It definitely makes you think differently and encourages you to take charge of your financial education. And the author's final thought is really powerful. Every day, with every dollar, you decide to be rich, poor, or middle class.
It puts the responsibility right in your hands.
It does. So that was our deep dive into Rich Dad, Poor Dad. For me, the most impactful parts were how it redefines terms like assets and liabilities, and how it stresses the importance of learning and financial education, even over making money right now. What about you? What resonated with you?
I think the constant message to question traditional financial wisdom and to take control of your financial future, that was really powerful.
We want you to really think about which viewpoints in the book resonated with you and why.
The concepts we discussed today are just the start. Rich Dad, Poor Dad has a lot more to offer. We highly recommend checking out the book or other related resources.
And that concludes this deep dive. But the journey continues, and we'll be back soon with another deep dive for you.